All right, welcome everybody. Just wanted to make sure everything is working before we get started and make sure that the audio is working and all that stuff. I haven't done a live stream in like a few weeks, and so might be a few little kinks here at the beginning. But I'm super excited because I got in today my A7 III. On the table here I have the A7R III. This is what I've been shooting with since it came out. So this has been my main camera. And I'm actually really excited because I have an event that I'm shooting this afternoon, which is why I thought I would do this right now and just kind of get it unboxed and talk about the camera a little bit and maybe compare it to the A7R III. And if anybody has any questions out there in the chat, just do my best to answer those as we're kind of going through that together. So I'm going to get right into it. We're going to start unboxing. Is the video working? Yeah? Okay. For some odd reason, it says the video is unavailable for me. So I'm not sure what's actually happening, but thanks for the confirmation on the video and the audio being good. I'm just going to refresh my thing here just because, yep, probably had some sort of a bandwidth issue over here. Anyways, so A7R III right here. I'm going to go ahead and pop open this box, and then I'll give you guys a little bit closer of a camera view. Ordered it from B&H. I pre-ordered it when it came out. Usually I expedite the shipping on these, which means I would have gotten this on Monday, probably Monday or Tuesday. But I opted to just go with the standard shipping because I had a busy week earlier this week. All right, so let's go ahead and give a little bit better of a view here. Pretty cool. I'm excited. I had the A7 II, which came out a while ago. I bought that because I think at the time I just had an A7S, and so I had the A7S and the A7 II, and I really liked the A7 II, but then when the A7R II came out, that obviously was a huge upgrade in comparison to the A7 II, so I went to that. Then from the A7R2, I got an A9 and spent a little bit of time with the A9. I've put a couple videos up about having had the A9 and deciding to get rid of it just because of how expensive it was. And the A7R III came out, and I felt that the A7R III would probably be a better fit for me. But I've done a lot of jumping around. But I'm excited about the A7 III because of all of the features that it has that are almost A9-like features. There are some things that I have really liked about the A7R III, but then there are things that I have not liked about it. It's a fantastic camera. It's just for event shooting, it's not really fast enough. I mean, don't get me wrong, like autofocus on it is great. There's a lot of good features to this camera, but when you're shooting fast, you need something that doesn't get in your way, and this camera kind of can do that a little bit. Atomic Media, I'm going to read your question here. You have both the S2 and R2. You want to know my thoughts on upgrading to the A7 III as a replacement for the S2, A7S2. So if you do video, I would say, and here's my thoughts. Like, I had the A7S. It was my first Sony mirrorless camera, was the A7S. That's the camera that sold me on this whole platform. And from then, when I had that camera, I haven't looked back. I had the A7S for quite a while. Even the A7S II came out. I still had the A7S. I didn't end up buying an A7S II because enough time went by. I thought, okay, I'll just get the A7S III when it comes out. And of course, over the last couple of years, Sony's had some setbacks just with things going on over there, and so their new models, which usually were coming out every year, didn't come out last year. So I held out and I didn't get an A7S II, even though I rented a lot of A7S2s last year for different jobs that we did. Now, I don't think that the A7III is going to be able to compete with the A7S III as far as video goes. When you take into account low light and all that stuff, I think the A7S III is going to come with a lot of features that are going to be really good for video. Obviously, the A7S line of cameras has a lower megapixel, so if you're shooting photos with that, you're going to get a smaller image, but you trade that out for having the amazing low light functionality. So I do both as well. I shoot a lot of photos with these cameras, and I also shoot a lot of video. And the A7R III has been great for video. There's been some updates and some things that I really like about the camera, but I think that the A7III is going to be a little bit better fit for right now, as far as kind of being a hybrid shooter, shooting both photo and video. Later this month, I have a 3-day event that I'll be shooting both photo and video at, and so by the end of this month, I'm going to have a really good idea of what is the best camera for me, because we'll probably have an A7S II that we'll rent for that job. I'll have both of these cameras, and then we also have some A6500s that we use. So for me, if I had an S2 and an R2, I would consider selling the R2 before it lost much more value. It still can sell for a pretty decent price, like if you were looking to sell it, and maybe get this, but I wouldn't necessarily replace the S2 with this, because when you're shooting video, you're probably using some manual focus and stuff. So some of the newer like autofocus features aren't necessarily like super important. I would hold out for the A7S III and see what happens there. Let me read some more of these questions here. Yes, getting new gear is still the best. Doesn't matter. Getting new gear is fun, and playing with new things, I like it. Definitely looking forward to some of the new Tamron lenses that are coming out as well. I've stuck pretty much to Sony lenses and Zeiss lenses. I haven't wandered too far, except for cinema specific lenses, but as far as like lenses that I use for dual purpose, both photo and video, I've stuck mostly to Sony, because their G Master lenses are just fantastic. I mean, I have the 24-70 right here. I've got the 85 GM right here. The only GM lens that I don't have is the super zoom that they came out with last year. So let's get into the unboxing. I'll keep asking questions. Like, I love talking about this stuff. I think it's good things to talk about when trying to decide, like, do you upgrade a camera or whatnot. My thoughts, like I said, on this camera, once it was announced and they started talking about it, I missed some of the features of the A9, like the autofocus is just really good on the A9. I mean, it's great on this camera, on the A7R III, but the autofocus was so fast on the A9, and the camera I'm missing the zero blackout as well on the A9. I know I'm not going to get that on this camera, but there are some other features that just really worked out well for me, and I still can't justify going and spending $4,500 on the A9, and that's why I'm kind of taking into account this A7III here to see if I could get the best of what I liked out of the A9 in this camera before I decide to dive back in and maybe get another A9. Or I've always speculated that maybe Sony would also come out with an A9S and an A9R, and an A9S would be epic, I think. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, lost feed. I've been having that too. If you just refresh, it will come back. I don't know why it's doing that. My bandwidth is pretty solid over here from what I can see. So I don't know. Just hit the refresh and it will come back. Hey, what's up, Mask Mighty? Thanks for joining us. Everybody who's in the chat, thanks for joining us. The combo of this camera and the 2470 G Master would definitely be good enough to record a wedding. You know, a lot of times when we were filming weddings, we were using A6500s just because they're small and nimble. They're not like super good in low light, but they're fantastic cameras and they're really affordable. I think that this camera is more than good enough for shooting weddings. So got the typical A7 camera strap here, and underneath that is probably a few other little accessories like our battery charger, our little USB battery charger. We've got the battery. Super excited that all these Sony cameras are moving over to the larger battery. That is a great move, even though I have so many of these little NP FW50s that I'm going to have to figure out what to do with. But you know what? As long as the camera's lasting double the amount of time, I'm not too worried about it. I also have the USB cable, which I won't use. This charging cable, or this I won't use. Just, you know, leave those in the box. They're not too exciting. So I did buy the kit. You know, I bought the kit because I wanted to see how good the lens is, and it wasn't that expensive to get the little 28-70 lens. I wanted to see if there were any updates to this lens. I think it's came on previous models. It came with previous models, but I wanted to kind of check it out and see how it worked with this camera, because, you know, a lot of people aren't going to go out and buy G Master lenses. If I'm going to do a review of this camera and talk about it, I need to talk about it with a lens that's more reasonably priced and see how it works. So let's go ahead and get this out. Looks like that's all that's really left in the box is the little camera itself. I'm going to get my battery out. Definitely need that, and then we should be able to get the box and all that stuff out of the way. I don't know about you guys, but I keep my boxes. I take very good care of my boxes because you know, after I've used the camera for a while and I want to move on to another version, I tend to sell it, and I want to be able to get good resale value out of it. So comparing the two, you know, they're both basically the exact same body here. You know, I like that Sony went to a little bit beefier of a body. Like when they came out with the A7, the A7S, the body was just so tiny and hard to hang on to. Let's see, look into the chat here, even f4 lenses. Yes, you know, even this lens right here, this lens which... you know, the challenge with variable aperture lenses, which means that the aperture will change as you zoom in, is this is in 3.5 to 5.6. That can change your exposure while you zoom, but still even something like this that you're going to be able to shoot with, you could get this little kit right here and shoot fantastic wedding videos with it. I would, of course, get a like a Rode mic or something like that so you can get some better audio, but you can shoot some fantastic stuff with that. Hey, what's up, Eric? And give me props for the videos as they help you out. Oh, that's great. Thanks so much for that. Appreciate it. That's the reason we're here. I'm here to learn as I go, to share what I learn with all of you, and to learn from others. I think that that's just the best way to grow as photographers or videographers or whatnot. All right, so let's talk about the camera a little bit. So nice body, just like the you know, other models. We've had a little bit thicker of a body for a while, which is good. We've got in here the dual SDs, which is great. That seems to be another new standard that Sony is rolling out on all of their A7s now, the dual SDs. I thought maybe, you know, it might only end up being on the A7R because it is a little bit higher end of an A7, but if it's on this, it means it's also probably going to be on the A7S3. Now, the first thing that I do when I get one of these cameras is I remove these little things. They drive me up the wall because they're so noisy. I don't use a camera strap typically, or a camera strap that's connected this way. I use a camera strap that is connected to that I connect to a bottom plate like this custom SLR plate that's on my on the bottom of this camera. So most likely I will move the body, or move the battery grip over to this camera as well. I like having, you can see here, like the camera is really small for my hand, or in my hand, and I just like having a little bit extra to hold on to, because naturally you're going to want to put your hand right here, and then the bottom half of my, or third of my hand doesn't have anything to hold on to, and I just like having a solid grip on my camera. So I'm going to continue getting rid of these little camera strap deals here. I don't, they continue to put these little metal noisy things on there, which you know, if you shoot video with your camera and you put any sort of a microphone on the camera, it's going to be really obnoxious to have that clicking noise just going on nonstop. So let's see what we got here. But would the f4 be good enough in a low light situation? You know, when I first switched over to Sony, they didn't have any G Master lenses at all yet. And so their 70-200 was an f4. Their 24-70 was an f4. Like, all their lenses, basically, except for a few prime lenses, were f4 lenses. And so I thought, like, oh, there's no way I'm going to be able to shoot with f4 lenses, because even if I have the A7S, the low light just isn't going to be there. But the A7S with an f4 lens outperformed my Canon 5D Mark III in low light with an f2.8 70-200 lens. So f4 is not the end of the world. You know, some of the lenses, some of the cheaper lenses that Sony has, they still have those f4 lenses. You can shoot with those. It'll be perfectly fine. Obviously, like, being able to get down to f2.8 would be better. But with how good these cameras are in low light, especially if you went with the A7S II, or waited for the A7S III to come out, an f4 lens would be no problem whatsoever. Eric's saying a Nikon lover and wanted to change with this A7 III. Yeah, you know what? I switched over, like I was saying at the beginning of this video. I was shooting with the Canon 5D Mark III. I had a 5D Mark II before that. I'd been shooting Canon for 10 years, and when I got the A7S, it was kind of game over for me. The 85 1.4 G Master I have right here. This lens is amazing. It's my favorite lens that I have. This 85 G Master lens, like, I use it for everything, even in situations where I might be in a smaller area and 85 might be a little too too telephoto for the situation. I still like to use this lens because it's just so good. Yeah, sorry, the session seems to be cutting off a little bit. Let me know if there's something that gets cut off so that I could specifically repeat it. I think that this video you should be able to watch this video back in its entirety without having any of those session issues. I think that that's just a playback issue that maybe YouTube's having, because I haven't had any issues so far here. So let's kind of take a look. I just want to kind of compare what's different between these two cameras. So there's no lock on the mode selector here. So on this camera, there's a lock in the center. There's no lock on this one. Shutter feels very much the same. We've got our two custom buttons up here. We have, like, our exposure compensation here. We have the wheel on the back side, and of course the front side for adjusting your aperture and adjusting your shutter. If we look on the back of the camera, they are pretty much identical. This one's a little dusty. It's been in my bag. It traveled with me to Texas earlier last week. I got back from Texas on Monday. So yeah, those look pretty much the same there. Let's go to the side of the camera and look at our ports. So we'll pop all these opened here. We've got our plug-in power here, our microphone in, and then we have external flash control. On this camera, all we have is the microphone, so we don't have external flash control on the A7 III, which, you know, is okay because I typically don't plug any external light into the camera. I use some sort of a remote trigger, such as a Pocket Wizard. So being that I use Pocket Wizards, that doesn't really hurt my feelings at all. We then have the HDMI and the monitor, the headphone out, which is super important if you're going to be shooting video, to have that headphone out for monitoring. Then we also over here have the same ports, which is the USB-C connector, which is fantastic. It's also accepts a solid-state drive, which the one thing I haven't tested but I want to test is whether or not you can plug a solid-state drive right into this camera and actually record to it. So instead of recording to your SD cards here, actually record straight to a solid-state drive. And then we have our multi-in, which is basically your micro USB, which you can use to charge. One thing that I absolutely... Well, no, you don't need to use that to charge. I'm sorry, that's the multi-out for like connecting to a television, stuff like that. You can charge using the USB Type-C. What I like about the way that works is with these cameras now, with the version 3, not only can you charge the battery that's in the camera, so the battery I just put in this camera, but that will actually charge the battery grip. So both batteries in the battery grip can be charged from that, which is fantastic. Like I had a job last month, and it was a 3.5 day job, and every night I would just plug basically a cell phone charger cable right into my camera. In the morning, both batteries were charged up, and the grip, it would last all day long. So which model lens do you prefer for landscape photos? Man, you know, it really depends, because it depends on how wide of a landscape you're trying to capture. I use, like I said, I have all the G Master lenses except the Super Zoom, the 100 to 400. And typically for when I'm going out and shooting landscapes, I'll probably end up having like the 2470 on, or maybe the, what is it, the 15 to 35 or the 14 to 35, whatever it is, just because those lenses are wide, but also if I need to zoom in and get in on something a little bit more tight, I have that room to play. I like to be a little bit more agile. I don't typically, even when I go out and want to shoot landscapes, I'm kind of on the move. I'm not like locked down on a tripod or really anything like that. I just don't have that opportunity too often. Really, the only time that I've done that in the recent last couple of years is when I went to shoot the eclipse last year. I obviously did a lot of stuff on tripods with everything locked down, but most of the time I'm shooting handheld, running around looking for things to shoot and stuff like that, if I even get that opportunity. So let's see here in the chat what else we've got going on. How long could I shoot with the grip? You know, if I'm shooting just photos, you can shoot thousands of photos with the grip attached. Let's see, the last I had an all-day shoot last week. An all-day shoot, I shot like 2,500 photos, and I barely burned through one battery. So I could have gone a whole nother day of shooting on the batteries that were in the battery grip. Shooting video is another story. Obviously, that takes a lot more power, and it really depends on what you are, what you're shooting, and how long the sessions are. If you're shooting 4K rather than 1080, that's going to take a lot more battery life. We tend to shoot everything in 4K now. So that sucks battery life down quite a bit, but I can shoot for a long time on both of those. I don't have like an exact amount of time that I can tell you, because a lot of times we're also shooting with HDMI out into like an Atomos recorder, or I have an external monitor or something like that. And so there's lots of variables there, and it's really hard to kind of give an exact. So we haven't powered the camera on yet. We've talked about kind of what's different or what's the same between the A7R III, which is the only other third generation camera that's out right now. We obviously do not have an A7S III yet, but we'll get there. So I'm going to go ahead and put this lens on. This is the kit lens, like I was talking about earlier, that came with the camera. I decided to order it because it was cheap, and I wanted to see how it would perform. I believe I had a lens, either this lens or a lens similar to it, with a previous camera that I purchased. It might very well have been the A7II, but I'm pretty sure I had this lens before, and it was actually a really good lens, really lightweight, and did perform pretty well. So let's go ahead and power this sucker up and see what we get. You know, I want to see available screen space here. I think the screens are basically about the same size on both of these cameras. They look to be about the same size. So we'll select English. We'll go in and move it over to California time, and we'll set the date and time. I need to look and see if I've actually updated this camera for daylight savings that was like last month, I think. Let's go date and time setup. Yeah, I didn't do that yet, so let's go back. Let's turn that on and see. Yes, we are good now. Okay, so I didn't even make that adjustment, but when I'm shooting with two cameras, especially photos, it sure makes it a lot easier to have both of the cameras set to the same time. So let's go and set our date here. What is today, the 12th? Yes. And then it is 11:52 a.m. I'll just put it on 11:53 now. And there we go. We are set up, and the battery is about dead. If I remember right, the battery when it came in this was like completely dead. So who knows how long this will last here. So it comes set in P for professional mode and video, or I can go over to manual mode for photos. I'm just going to go through some quick setups. I'm going to do a video. I just launched a video on the Ditch Auto channel here on the top 5 things that I changed first on this camera when I first got it. I'm going to go and do the same video for this camera because I find those to be important. Like, we all learn how to use a camera a certain way that's comfortable to us. We kind of work it into our workflow when we're out and shooting and stuff, and so going and customizing a camera and making some settings adjustments are important. And some people have different settings that I do, and I've found even maybe those settings to be kind of cool, and I implement 1 or 2 of those into my workflow. But I think it's cool just to see what each other does, what we each do to our cameras, and why, so that we can learn to be faster and better photographers, more agile when it comes to shooting things that are moving quickly. I mentioned the S3. Do you have any predictions for the features? Seeing as Black Magic. I was watching that Pocket Cinema camera with its new features. I'm pretty excited about that. Also was watching the new FS5, Sony FS5 Mark II with its 4K 120 frames per second. I'm like super excited about that. I don't know if I'll actually get one or not, but I'm just excited that we're in a place where an affordable camera can shoot 4K at 120 frames per second. I'll be honest, the Blackmagic, some of the features that it has are extremely cool, like being able to shoot 4K directly to a little SD or a little SSD. I think that's fantastic because that gives you like a terabyte that you can record right to. I use Atomos digital recorders, which are not super expensive, but they're not super cheap either. And I use those because it's easier to record to them. I need a monitor anyways, and you can put terabyte drives right in them. But it probably would be cheaper to use monitors that were just kind of more basic monitors, and then just buy some little solid state, Samsung hard drives, those little T3, T5 hard drives, which I already have a few of. Plug those right into the camera and record to them. I mean, that just sounds like a great workflow for me. Less cables, less bulkiness. So the Pocket Cinema camera definitely looks promising. The only problem for me is that I only have a few micro four thirds lenses. Those are lenses that I use on my Inspire 2 drone, and most of those lenses are pretty wide. So I don't have a very expansive inventory of lenses that I can use with something like that. So if I was to go Pocket Cinema camera, I would have to look at investing in some lenses, which, not necessarily a bad thing, but I don't know. I don't know if I'll go that way or not. I'll probably rent one and see what it's all about. The price is definitely impressive on that camera, considering it's about the same price as a A6500. The camera that I'm looking into right now is an A6500. The top camera that you were seeing earlier is also an A6500. So we'll see what happens there. So can you adjust the settings in the clock? Are you talking about in the clock on the cameras? Yeah, you definitely can adjust the clock, which I just did, to set the clocks the same here on both of these. So later today, actually in about an hour, I'm going to be heading out. I think I'm just going to take the battery grip off of this camera, put it on this camera, and go and shoot this event today with the A7III here, just to kind of get my feet wet with it. I obviously need to put the battery that's in this camera on the charger so that I can use it later. But thinking about predictions of the let me see, are these doors the same here? Yeah, they look exactly the same, the battery door. Go ahead and pop that off. Slide this right in here. So my predictions for the A7S III is, that it will have better autofocus. It'll have a touch screen on the back. It'll kind of bring over a lot of the features that these other cameras, that these other models now have. I'm hoping that it will get 4K at 60 frames per second at least. It would be awesome if they had something higher, but I don't think that they will, because then why would you buy the FS5 that they just released? But 4K 60 frames per second out of the camera would be fantastic. Other features, I don't really think that there will be too many crazy things. I just think that they're going to bring a lot of the autofocus. And of course, with the A9, one of the things that was way better on the A9 and even kind of better on the A7S III, and we'll see on the A7 III, is autofocus shifting when you are shooting video. So for example, you've got the touch screen on the back, and say you have, somebody over here and the focus point is on them. A lot of times I will rack focus by tapping onto another point, and then the camera will use the autofocus. It will actually rack focus for me. And on the A9, that was so smooth. It was just amazing. And it's really not too bad on the A7R III either. But it should be better on the A7 III, because the A7R III was created to shoot high resolution images. It's mostly for photography. It's why there's a trigger in the side of the camera for flash, for strobes and whatnot. Yes, it shoots 4K and it shoots beautiful 4K, but this is more of the photography camera. This is more of the, we want to shoot everything, but it's not the high end. And then of course the A7S III will be, the high end for the video. So do you know if you can use the Black Rapid strap with the Sony extension grip? So the Black Rapid strap, I have Black Rapid straps, and they just attach, you know, with a 1/4-20, and then, you know, that little clip or whatnot. Man, this feels, well, it's a different lens, but this feels so light. It's the lens. I use the custom SLR M plate here because I like to kind of offset the camera weight a little bit. So when it's hanging from your camera strap, it's hanging more like this. Whereas if you have it here, it's really offset, and the weight of your camera, it just doesn't seem to float very nice. And I like having the weight a little bit offset here. And then, of course, I can set the camera down nice. And even with a bigger lens, I don't have to set the camera on the lens because it has this little foot that comes out. So I like having the weight of the camera be offset a little bit, maybe more centered, so that I don't have to put all of that weight back here. And I don't feel like it's pulling on everything. So you could definitely use the Black Rapid strap because it just takes that little 1/4-20 and you screw it in. The strap that I use is a strap from Custom SLR as well, very similar to the Black Rapid strap. And so I just attach that 1/4-20 mount right here, and then clip in whenever I'm ready to hook the camera to my camera strap. So I'm a big fan of this plate. Even on the A6500s, I have the smaller version of the plate, which is basically just this portion of the plate, just because I like having the additional mounting points, and also having the Arca Swiss plate built in here so that I could just slide this right into a tripod. So very useful little adapter there that I like. And of course, even not necessarily on a lens this big, but this also adds a little bit more spacing, so when I set the camera down, it's not laying on the lens. I kind of don't like too much pressure being on the lenses. The Sony GP-X1EM camera grip. It's different from the one that I have. I think, isn't that the grip that allows for an extra battery, but it's kind of sloped at the bottom? I think if that's the other battery extension that I think I've seen. I don't like the way that it. The reason I haven't got one is because I like, when I set my cameras down, I want it to be flat. I don't want the camera to be all cockeyed or whatnot. I don't know if it's an OCD thing of mine, but I saw that battery grip and it has like the slope, and I just couldn't get behind that. I don't know if that's the grip you're talking about. Maybe I need to pull that up here on the. I'm going to pull it up just to make sure that we're talking about the same thing, because I very well could be talking about the wrong. Yeah, that's the grip that it's the extension grip. Yeah, the extension grip, I don't know. I don't think you can, because the 1/4-20 is used up. So the grip extension, which, yeah, that's not a battery grip, it's just a grip extension. That would get me the more of a hand grip, but it isn't going to give you an extra battery. So yeah, I just haven't really looked into it, because it does take up the let me see if there's a way I can switch to my desktop here so some of you all can see. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so you can see what I'm looking at now. So that I don't like what's going on here. I don't know if you could see my mouse. I don't like what's going on down here, and the fact that now my camera, if I was setting my camera down, it would be all cockeyed. I do like the fact that there's the extra grip, so we have more room for the hand there, and it would be more comfortable. But if I'm going to do this to the bottom of my camera, I would rather have an extra battery in there, and I wouldn't want to lose my 1/4-20. So I believe you would use or lose your 1/4-20 in that instance, and to me, I don't want to lose the 1/4-20. So my current lens lineup, oh man, my current lens lineup, I have a lot of lenses, probably more than I need. When I'm filming, predominantly, like if we're filming weddings, it depends. Like if I'm filming like the getting ready aspect of the wedding, I'll be probably shooting with the 85 because I can kind of stay back a little bit. I can get really nice shallow depth of field. You know, the low light is fantastic on that lens because it's so wide or so fast. So I'll shoot with that a lot. When I'm shooting anything else where action is happening and I can't miss the opportunity, like for example during the ceremony, during aspects of the reception, I will use a zoom lens like the 2470, or if I'm far away I'll use the 7200, mainly because I don't want to have to switch lenses. I'm filming and I want to be able to zoom and react. And when you're shooting with a prime, the only way that you can react is by like physically moving yourself towards or away from the action when you're filming. And during a wedding, when you need to be quiet, when you can't necessarily just go run wherever you want to go, you need to have some zoom so that you can react to what's going on without like being a disruption yourself. So though I would rather shoot with all primes just because primes, fixed focal length lenses are, they definitely produce, I think, a little bit nicer of a look. Zooms make me more reactive to what's going on. And if, say I was shooting, with the 85, and the 85 from where I was at, everything was good, but then I needed to get wide all of a sudden because something was happening, like I would have to really move back quite far. And without having zoom, you're kind of stuck. And so when you're shooting weddings, having zoom is great. And when you're shooting aspects of a wedding that are not like kind of do or die action moments, like that are non-repeatable, because like if you're shooting, the bride getting her hair done or whatever, you can always, if you miss the shot, you can always ask the hairstylist like, oh, do that again, or spray the hairspray again so I can get that mist. You can always have them do that stuff again, but you can't have them do, like if there's organic things that are happening during the wedding, like you can't have that done again. So you need to be able to just, zoom in, zoom out, do whatever. And so I'll often end up using the 2470 quite often because that gets me in tighter, gets me out pretty wide. And so the 2470 just ends up being like a really great lens for that. So, and even when I'm shooting photos, having a zoom lens is good because you want to be reactive. You want to be able to capture whatever's going on. Portrait work, landscapes, things that don't, that you can control the situation, that's when you can really get more specific with your lenses and go more for a unique look, maybe by using a prime lens because you have control over that entire situation. So if there's any other questions, feel free to ask. I'm probably going to end our live stream here in a few moments because I need to finish getting ready for my shoot that's coming up. I'm going to have to leave probably in about 15 minutes here. So I appreciate everybody jumping into the chat here and asking questions. It's definitely been great talking. I want to do more Q&A type sessions where we talk about stuff. I like talking about this, even though we were here to unbox and talk about the A7 III. We talked about a lot of good stuff, and that's what I want to do these live streams for. So I'm going to try and do better at figuring out how to get these scheduled and get all this stuff connected so that I can give you all a warning as to when we're going to go live so that you can prepare to be available during that time. And until then, if anybody has any questions, once this video goes live, the comment section will be available. You can ask in there. You can also hit me up on Twitter or Facebook or whatnot. I've put my contact details down in the description of the video, and so once this video is saved to the YouTube channel, all of that, and all of my details are in the description of any other video that we have out on the YouTube channel as well. So make sure to check that out. And we also have the Facebook group, the Ditch Auto Facebook group. So if you go to Facebook and just do a search for Ditch Auto, you'll find our Facebook group. We'd love to have you in there as well. We're doing a photo challenge this month on the topic of pets. So if you want to take part in that photo challenge, I mean, we're not quite halfway through the month yet, so there's plenty of time to take part in that. I think like 1 or 2 videos prior to what's on the channel now is the video where I talk about this month's challenge with pet photography and all that good stuff. So love to have you all as a part of that. So thanks so much for being along for the live stream. Appreciate all of you and hope to see you back soon in another video. Take care.